The apartment was silent except for the dripping faucet Violet Barnes couldn't afford to fix. She stood before the bathroom mirror, her reflection revealing what 3 days without proper food did to a person. The dark circles under her hazel eyes resembled bruises. Her cheekbones jutted sharper than they had a month ago. She twisted her auburn hair into a practical bun, securing it with bobby pins that caught on tangles she didn't have the energy to brush out. 24 years old, and this is what survival looks like. The dress hanging on her closet door mocked her with its elegance. She'd found it at a consignment shop 2 weeks ago, spent an hour taking in the waist, adjusting the hemline. Navy blue fabric that probably cost someone a month of her salary when it was new. Now it would help her blend in at a world she'd never belonged to. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied concealer. The makeup compact was nearly empty, scraped clean at the edges. Each dab required precision. She couldn't afford to waste a single smear. The invitation sat on her kitchen counter, embossed letters catching the morning light. Graves Foundation Annual Charity Gala. Her boss, Mr. Pemberton, had shoved it at her 3 days ago with his usual charm. "You'll attend as my assistant. Unpaid, naturally. Consider it professional development." Professional development. The phrase tasted bitter. Violet's stomach cramped. A sensation she'd grown accustomed to ignoring. The refrigerator hummed empty behind her. She'd opened it twice this morning out of habit, staring at the bare shelves as if food might materialize through sheer will. A bottle of tap water, half a jar of expired mustard. That was the inventory. Rent had consumed her last paycheck. The accounting firm where she worked had delayed salaries again, promising payment within the week. That promise was now 2 weeks old. She slipped into the dress, felt the zipper catch against her protruding spine. Everything hung looser than it should. She cinched a belt to create the illusion of shape, of normalcy. Her phone buzzed. "Pemberton. Car arrives at 6 p.m. Don't be late. And smile, for God's sake. You represent my firm." She didn't respond. The hours crawled past. Violet spent them lying on her second-hand couch, conserving energy, her body a thing she observed from the distance. The dizziness had started yesterday, spots in her vision that bloomed and faded like dark flowers. Just get through tonight. Tomorrow you'll figure something out. At 5:30 she forced herself upright, applied lipstick with a steady hand that betrayed none of her weakness, stepped into uncomfortable heels she'd owned since college. The car Pemberton sent wasn't for her. She rode in a rideshare, watching the city transform through the window. Her neighborhood of cracked sidewalks and barred windows gave way to tree-lined streets, then to the glittering downtown corridor where buildings touched the sky. The hotel rose before her like a glass cathedral. Violet paid the driver with the last bills in her wallet, watched him drive away with her final escape route. The marble steps leading to the entrance seemed insurmountable. She gripped the brass railing, pulled herself upward. One step, another, breathe. The lobby exploded with wealth. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across marble floors polished to mirrors. Women in gowns that cost more than Violet's yearly rent glided past. Men in tuxedos laughed, their comfort in the space absolute. She didn't belong here. "Miss Barnes." Pemberton's voice cut through the crowd. He approached, his bulk straining against his tuxedo, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "There you are. I need you to handle the coat check, then fetch me drinks throughout the evening. Stay available." "I thought I was attending as a representative of the firm." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're representing me by being useful. Now go." The ballroom stretched endless. Round tables draped in white linen surrounded a dance floor that gleamed. A string quartet played something classical and beautiful. Servers circulated with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres that made Violet's mouth water. She gripped the back of a chair as a wave of dizziness crashed over her. "Not yet. Hold on." "Champagne?" A server appeared at her elbow. Violet shook her head. Alcohol on an empty stomach would finish what hunger had started. Across the room, she noticed him. Julian Graves stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his presence commanding attention without effort. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a tuxedo that looked like it had been created specifically for his frame. He wasn't smiling at the socialites vying for his attention. His steel-gray eyes scanned the crowd with the focus of someone cataloging threats. Their gazes met for a fraction of a second. Violet looked away first, her heart hammering. "Miss Barnes!" Pemberton's bark made her flinch. "I've been calling you. I need another scotch. And there's someone I want you to meet. Take notes on the conversation." She moved through the crowd, each step requiring conscious thought. The floor tilted slightly. She corrected her balance, forced her spine straight. Professional, capable, fine. The lies she told her body were wearing thin. Pemberton introduced her to a series of investors whose names blurred together. She smiled, nodded, pretended her vision wasn't narrowing at the edges. Someone handed her a champagne flute to hold while they took a photo. The glass felt impossibly heavy. "You look pale," a woman in diamonds observed. "Are you quite well?" "Perfectly fine, thank you." Another lie. The evening dragged on. Violet fetched drinks, held coats, smiled until her face ached. The ballroom grew warmer, or perhaps that was just her. Sweat gathered at her temples despite the chill creeping through her limbs. She found herself gripping a marble column, her fingernails digging into the cold stone. Across the room, Julian Graves was watching her. His gaze held something she couldn't name. Not pity. Recognition, maybe. As if he saw past the dress, the makeup, the performance of normalcy. Violet released the column, straightened her shoulders, took 3 steps toward the exit. The floor rushed up to meet her. She heard the champagne glass shatter, heard someone scream, felt her knees buckle, felt gravity claim her. Then strong arms caught her, stopped her fall. The world tilted sideways. She caught a glimpse of steel-gray eyes, felt herself being lifted as if she weighed nothing. "Call my private doctor." Julian Graves' voice came from very far away. "And clear the penthouse, now." Darkness pulled at her consciousness. The last thing Violet registered was the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her ear, and the strange sensation of being, for the first time in years, completely safe. Then, nothing. Consciousness. Consciousness returned in fragments, softness beneath her, Egyptian cotton against skin that had known only cheap polyester for years. The gentle hum of climate control. City lights painting patterns across unfamiliar walls through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the skyline like art. Violet's eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above her was impossibly high, adorned with recessed lighting that glowed warm and subtle. This wasn't a hospital. The realization sent panic coursing through her limbs. She tried to sit up. Her body protested immediately, muscles weak as water. Something tugged at her inner elbow. An IV line taped professionally to her arm, the bag hanging from a portable stand beside the bed. Where am I? The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment. Minimalist furniture in dark wood and chrome. A door stood ajar, revealing marble bathroom fixtures. Everything screamed wealth. The kind that didn't announce itself but simply existed as natural as breathing. Violet pulled at the IV tape. Her fingers fumbled, clumsy with residual weakness. "I wouldn't recommend that." A woman's voice, crisp and professional, came from the doorway. She entered carrying a tablet, wearing scrubs and an expression of clinical assessment. Late 40s, dark hair pulled back, stethoscope around her neck. "You're still receiving fluids. Your body needs them." "Who are you?" "Where am I?" "Dr. Patricia Montgomery. You're in Mr. Graves' private residence. You collapsed at his gala approximately 3 hours ago." She approached the bed, checked the IV flow rate with practiced efficiency. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, dangerously low blood pressure. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" Violet's jaw tightened. "I need to leave." "You need to rest. Your vitals have stabilized, but you're in no condition to go anywhere." The doctor's gaze held no judgment. Only facts delivered with surgical precision. "I've recommended 48 hours of monitoring. I can't afford this." The words came out sharper than intended. "I didn't ask for any of this. Mr. Graves is covering all medical expenses. Now I need to examine you properly. May I?" Every instinct screamed to refuse, to run, to escape this gilded cage before the debt became insurmountable. But Violet's body had already made its choice. Sinking deeper into pillows that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She nodded once. The examination was thorough and humiliating. Dr. Montgomery documented everything with detached professionalism, while Violet stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears that had nothing to do with physical pain. Dehydration, the doctor concluded, making notes. Malnourishment consistent with prolonged caloric restriction. You're lucky Mr. Graves caught you. A head injury on that marble floor could have been catastrophic. Lucky, the word felt wrong. I'll check on you in 2 hours. Try to rest. Dr. Montgomery moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, you're not the first person Julian has helped. He has a habit of seeing people others overlook. Then Violet was alone with the IV drip and her spiraling thoughts. She counted the minutes, tested her strength by flexing her fingers, her toes. The weakness persisted, frustrating and undeniable. Outside the windows, the city glittered with 1,000 lives being lived. Down there, somewhere, was her apartment with its broken faucet and empty refrigerator. The door opened again. Julian. Ian Graves entered carrying a tray, and the domestic normalcy of the gesture jarred against everything else about him. He'd removed his tuxedo jacket, rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows. The careful styling of his dark hair had loosened slightly. He looked human somehow, and that made everything worse. You're awake. He set the tray on the bedside table. The aroma hit her immediately. Chicken broth, fresh bread, something with herbs that made her stomach clench with desperate hunger. Dr. Montgomery said you'd be combative. She was right. I want to leave. No, you don't. Julian pulled a chair closer to the bed, sat with the confidence of someone who owned everything in sight. His steel-gray eyes studied her with unsettling focus. You want to run because accepting help feels like failure. I understand that impulse. It's also stupid. Violet's hands fisted in the expensive sheets. You don't know anything about me. I know you collapsed at my event because you haven't eaten in days. I know you wore an altered second-hand dress and refused champagne because you couldn't risk alcohol on an empty stomach. His voice remained calm, stating facts without inflection. I know your boss treats you like property, and you tolerate it because you need the job. Heat flooded her face. You investigated me? I observed you. There's a difference. Julian leaned forward slightly. You were gripping that column like it was the only thing keeping you upright. Everyone else was too busy networking to notice. I noticed. Congratulations, you're very perceptive. The words came out acid-sharp. Now I'd like to leave. After you eat. I'm not hungry. The lie hung between them, obvious and pathetic. Her stomach chose that moment to cramp audibly. Julian's expression didn't change. He reached for the tray. Whiffed the bowl of broth. You have 2 options. Eat willingly, or I'll have Dr. Montgomery keep you here on medical grounds for observation. Malnutrition qualifies. That's coercion. That's reality. He held out the bowl. Stop being stubborn and eat. The fight drained out of her. Violet took the bowl with trembling hands, brought it to her lips. The first sip of broth hit her system like electricity. Warmth spread through her chest, her limbs. She forced herself to sip slowly, despite every cell in her body screaming for more. Julian watched in silence, not judging, just present. She finished half the bowl before nausea warned her to stop. Her stomach, unused to food, it couldn't handle more. Violet set it aside carefully, avoiding his gaze. Thank you. The words scraped her throat. You're welcome. Julian stood, retrieved the tray. We need to discuss your situation. There's nothing to discuss. I'll figure it out. How? The question wasn't cruel, just direct. Your firm is bleeding money. Your boss is embezzling. You're 3 weeks from eviction based on the late rent notices I saw in your wallet when I checked for emergency contacts. Rage and humiliation warred in her chest. You went through my wallet? You were unconscious. I needed to know if someone should be called. His tone remained infuriatingly even. There was no one. No emergency contact listed anywhere. The truth of that statement hurt worse than hunger. I'll manage. Violet pulled the IV from her arm with sudden violence, pressed her thumb against the puncture site. I always manage. She swung her legs over the bed. The room tilted. Dramatically. Julian moved fast, steadying her with hands on her shoulders. Sit down before you fall down. Don't touch me. Then stop trying to leave when you can barely stand. They locked eyes, inches apart. His grip remained firm but not painful. Violet's breath came too fast, her heart racing against her ribs. The door burst open. A woman strode in, tall and blonde and furious in a designer gown that probably cost 5 figures. Her blue eyes swept over the scene. Over Violet in the bed, wearing someone's borrowed clothes, over Julian's hands still on her shoulders. "What the hell is this?" The woman's voice could have cut glass. "Julian, who is she?" Julian released Violet, turned with visible irritation. "Rebecca, this is my private residence. You need to leave." "Your private residence where you're apparently keeping unconscious girls? I heard you carried someone out of the gala. I didn't realize you'd moved her into your bedroom." Rebecca's smile was venomous. "How charitable of you." She collapsed. She needed medical attention. Medical attention happens in hospitals, not penthouses. Rebecca moved closer, examining Violet with the thoroughness of someone cataloging threats. "Let me guess. Poor little thing, so grateful for the big, strong man who rescued her. How predictable." Violet felt fury override weakness. "I didn't ask to be here." "Oh, she speaks." Rebecca's laugh was sharp. "Julian, really? This is beneath even you. Playing savior to some—" "Get out." Julian's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Now." "We had plans tonight. Dinner after the gala, remember? We have business meetings. We don't have plans." He moved toward the door, opening it pointedly. "This is my home. You are not welcome here without invitation." Rebecca's expression hardened. "Be careful, Julian. People talk. A strange girl in your penthouse, unconscious. That's not a good look for the Graves Foundation." "Then it's fortunate I don't care about appearances." His steel gray eyes held no warmth. "Leave, Rebecca, before I have security escort you." The woman's jaw clenched. She cast one final blare at Violet, then swept from the room with theatrical fury. Silence settled heavy. Julian closed the door, leaned against it briefly. When he turned back, some of the hardness had left his expression. "I apologize for that." Violet wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. Who was she? A business associate who occasionally forgets boundaries. He moved back to the chair, sat heavily. "You should rest. We'll talk tomorrow." "About what?" "About what happens next." Julian met her eyes directly. "Because going back to that apartment, that job, that life, is not a viable option anymore." Morning arrived with natural light instead of the alarm clock anxiety Violet had lived with for years. She woke slowly, disoriented by the absence of traffic noise and sirens. The IV had been removed at some point during the night. A fresh set of clothes lay folded on the chair where Julian had sat. Jeans in her exact size, a simple sweater in soft gray, undergarments still tagged from an expensive boutique. The thoughtfulness of it made her throat tight. Violet showered in the marble bathroom, stood under water pressure that didn't sputter and die, used soap that smelled like lavender instead of chemical flowers, dried herself with towels thick enough to be blankets. The person in the mirror looked. Did less like a ghost. Color had returned to her cheeks. The dark circles remained, but softened. She braided her auburn hair over one shoulder, dressed in clothes that fit properly for the first time in months. The bedroom door opened into a hallway lined with abstract art. Violet moved quietly, her bare feet silent on hardwood floors that gleamed. The penthouse stretched enormous around her, all clean lines and expensive restraint. She found the office by accident, drawn by light spilling from a partially open door. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls. A massive desk dominated the space, covered in monitors and files. But what caught her attention was the wall opposite the desk. Photographs, dozens of them, arranged chronologically. Julian as a teenager, thin and hard-eyed, standing outside a homeless shelter. Julian in his early 20s wearing a security guard uniform. Julian accepting an award, still looking uncomfortable in formal clothes. And articles, framed newspaper clippings documenting his rise. Former foster youth launches cybersecurity startup. Graves Security goes public. Billionaire who started with nothing. I don't hide where I came from. Violet spun. Julian stood in the doorway wearing jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger than 32. His dark hair was still damp from a shower. He carried 2 coffee mugs. Steam rising from both. I didn't mean to snoop. You're curious. That's different than snooping. He entered, handed her one of the mugs. I was 16 in that first photo. I'd been on the streets for 3 months. Violet accepted the coffee, wrapped her hands around the warmth. What happened? Last foster placement fell through. I aged out with nowhere to go. Julian moved to the window, looked out at the city sprawling below. I slept in shelters when I could get a bed, worked security at night, took online courses during the day, built my first security program on a laptop I bought from a pawn shop. How did you go from that to this? Obsession, anger, spite, maybe. His reflection in the glass smiled without humor. I wanted to prove every person who'd written me off was wrong. Turns out that's powerful motivation. Violet studied the photographs again, saw the progression, the hardness in young Julian's eyes gradually shifting to confidence, then control. But something of that hungry teenager remained, visible if you knew to look. Why are you telling me this? So you understand I'm not rescuing you from someplace I've never been. Julian turned from the window. I know what pride tastes like when you're swallowing it to survive. I know what it's like to be invisible in rooms full of people. That doesn't explain why I'm here. No, it doesn't. He moved to the desk, opened a file. This is your boss, Pemberton. I had my people look into him last night. Violet's stomach clenched. You investigated him? I investigated the situation. There's a difference. Julian slid the file across the desk. Your firm has been insolvent for 6 months. Pemberton's been shuffling funds between accounts to hide the losses. You'll be unemployed within 3 months, regardless of what you do. She didn't open the file. That's not your concern. It became my concern when you collapsed at my event. His steel gray eyes held hers. I'm offering you a position. Personal assistant. $75,000 annually to start. Health insurance, housing stipend. End. The number made her dizzy. Why? Because I need someone detail-oriented who understands discretion. Someone not impressed by wealth or status. Someone who knows what it's like to fight for every inch. Julian leaned against the desk. You have those qualifications. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you altered that dress yourself because you couldn't afford tailoring. I know you refused champagne to stay sharp despite being forced to work an event unpaid. I know you didn't list an emergency contact because there isn't anyone. His voice remained factual, not pitying. I know you'd rather starve than ask for help. That kind of pride is either your greatest strength or your fatal flaw. Violet's hands tightened around the coffee mug. This is charity. This is employment. Business transaction. Julian straightened, crossed his arms. I'm not saving you. I'm hiring you because you're useful to me. I don't believe you. I don't particularly care what you believe. His bluntness caught her off guard. You have a choice. Accept the position, sign the contract, start rebuilding your life with actual resources. Or refuse, go back to that apartment with the broken faucet, wait for Pemberton's firm to collapse, and take you with it. The offer hung between them, too good to be real. Violet's instinct screamed trap, debt, obligation she couldn't repay. What do you really want from me? Something shifted in Julian's expression. Not anger, recognition maybe. Honesty, competence. Someone who'll tell me when I'm wrong instead of whatever they think I want to hear. Everyone in my orbit wants something. Money, access, status. You just want to survive. That's refreshing. Before Violet could respond, the office door opened without knocking. Rebecca strode in, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. Her blonde hair was pulled back severely, her expression radiating controlled fury. Julian, we need to talk about last night's incident. Rebecca, I don't recall inviting you. Julian's voice went cold. Or giving you access to my private residence. I still have the code from when we were collaborating on the Singapore deal. She smiled, sharp and triumphant. We need to discuss damage control. Having an unconscious woman in your penthouse creates liability issues for the foundation. The only liability issue here is you entering my home without permission. One of the suited men stepped forward. Mr. Graves, I'm Rebecca's attorney. We have concerns about potential impropriety that could affect. Stop talking. Julian's command cut through the room like a blade. He moved to his desk, pulled up something on one of his monitors. Rebecca, you've been embezzling from our joint venture accounts for 7 months. Small amounts, carefully hidden. Not carefully enough. Rebecca's face went pale. That's absurd. It's documented. Julian turned the monitor. Spreadsheets filled the screen. red highlights marking irregular transfers. I've had forensic accountants tracking it since March. I was deciding how to handle it quietly. Then you decided to threaten someone under my protection. The temperature in the room dropped. You can't prove anything, Rebecca said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. I can prove everything. Bank records, transaction histories, shell company formations, all tied directly to you. Julian's steel-gray eyes held no mercy. You have two options. Leave now, repay what you've stolen, and never contact me again. Or I file criminal charges this afternoon. Julian, be reasonable. Those are your options. Choose. The attorney whispered urgently to Rebecca. Her jaw worked, fury and calculation warring across her features. Finally, she looked at Violet with pure venom. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Julian moved between them, a wall of controlled threat. If you approach her, contact her, even mention her name, I'll bury you, legally and professionally. Are we clear? Rebecca's hands fisted at her sides. Without another word, she turned and left, her attorney scrambling after her. The second man hesitated, then followed. Silence settled heavy. Violet realized she'd been holding her breath. You had evidence of embezzlement and didn't use it until now? Business leverage. Sometimes it's more useful to know someone's secrets than to expose them. Julian closed the file on his monitor. She crossed a line. Consequences follow. You did that for me. I did that because she threatened someone in my home. There's a difference. But his eyes said otherwise. Violet set down her coffee mug carefully. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline and something else coursing through her. The job offer. 1-month trial period. I want that in writing. Already drafted. Julian pulled a contract from his desk drawer. Salary, benefits, job description, termination clauses. Everything legal and transparent. She took the papers, scanned them. The terms were exactly as stated. No hidden clauses, no obligations beyond professional duties. A separate apartment in his building. Not the penthouse. Her own entrance, her own space. Why does this feel too good to be true? Because you've been surviving in a world that takes everything and gives nothing. Julian held out a pen. This is what fairness actually looks like. You just forgot. Violet stared at the contract, at the salary that would let her breathe, at the chance to rebuild something resembling a life. Pride warred with pragmatism. Survival instinct won. She signed. 1-month trial, she repeated. If it doesn't work, I walk away. Agreed. Julian countered the signature. Your apartment is ready. I'll have someone help you move your belongings this week. 2 hours later, Violet stood in a grocery store for the first time in months with actual money in her account. She filled the cart slowly, deliberately. Fresh vegetables, real meat, bread that wasn't day-old discount, milk, eggs, coffee that didn't taste like burnt water. Each item felt like defiance against every hungry night, every skipped meal, every moment of grinding poverty. At the checkout, she counted the total without panic, paid without checking her balance 3 times. Outside, loading bags into the car Julian had arranged, Violet felt something crack open in her chest. Not quite hope, not yet, but possibility, maybe. The beginning of something that wasn't just survival. Across the parking lot, partially hidden behind a black SUV, Julian Graves watched her select an apple from one of the bags and bite into it. Watched relief and something like joy cross her face. He told himself it was just good business, an investment in reliable help, professional interest in an employee's well-being. But Julian Graves had built an empire on brutal honesty. And he'd never been good at lying to himself. This was something else entirely, and that terrified him more than he cared to admit.